Number 1.
Timothy Guthrie was last seen with his sister and mother, Julie and Leslie, in Katana, New York on February 5, 1977. They were last seen at approximately 1:30 p.m. when Leslie picked the two children up from their father, Timothy Sr.'s, home on Grandview Avenue. They were driving in a 1974 300 series Ford Maverick with a green roof and the New York license plate number 636 WNA. The children and Leslie have never been seen again. Leslie and Timothy Sr. separated prior to the disappearances, but they had a friendly or amiable relationship at the time. Leslie was living with her mother in White Plains, New York at the time of her and the children's disappearance. Their father was initially unconcerned when they didn't return that evening. He assumed they had spent the night in White Plains. He became concerned when a whole day passed. He reported them missing at 6 p.m. on February 6. Investigators do not believe that Leslie left with the children or voluntarily disappeared. She didn't take any clothing or personal belongings and didn't withdraw any substantial amount of money prior to the trio going missing. She also gave no indications of wanting to leave. Timothy Sr. has been cleared as a suspect in the case. He has cooperated in the investigation and has also spent considerable time and his life savings towards finding out what happened to his children and wife. He also hired a private investigator, but nothing was uncovered during his efforts to find answers. He still lives in the area and hopes to find his family. Investigators still believe the three might still be alive. There have been multiple people claiming to see Leslie and the kids in all different parts of the country. None of the sightings ever planned out. Investigators are unsure of how the trio went missing and call it suspicious, especially since their vehicle was never found. The children and Leslie remain missing and their case is unsolved. If you have any information concerning this case, please contact Bedford Town Police Department 914-241-3111.
Number 2.
Andrea was last seen in Fort Walton Beach, Florida on February 1, 1990. She was last known to be at her home in the Royal Apartments locates at the corner of Colonia Drive and Mayflower Avenue. She was last seen by her mother and sister at 7:45 p.m. Her mother told Andrea to vacuum the home while they were gone. They attended a meeting which spanned from 7:45 p.m. to 9:15 p.m. They returned to the home 2 hours later and discovered the residence to be unlocked. There were no signs of a forced entry, and all personal belongings of Andrea were still at the home, which included her purse, makeup, and clothing. They found the vacuum cleaner in an upright position in the living room. Investigators initially believed that Andrea had run away from home. She was somewhat unhappy at the time of her disappearance. She had to change schools and move apartments. It was actually Durham's first day of school on February 1st. Her mother moved them because she felt that Andrea had been hanging out with the wrong crowd. Andrea had also previously been in trouble with the law. She acted as a lookout person for other children while they stole money out of people's vehicles in a restaurant parking lot. Andrea was sentenced to community service. She reportedly was not worried about it. She also had a date in juvenile court after her disappearance. Investigators do speculate that Andrea might have remained in the area after her disappearance. Investigators received multiple reports of unconfirmed sightings of Andrea within a month of her disappearance. Most of the sightings were from Okaloosa County and the Holy Navarre area in Santa Rosa County. There have also been sightings in Pensacola and the Perdido Key area. None of the sightings were ever confirmed. Her family searched for her every day after she went missing, but she was never located. Various searches of areas such as campgrounds, beaches, and shopping malls have given no indication as to her whereabouts. Police even stakes out the Whitesnake concert in Pensacola on March 21 when the heavy metal band played. Andrea did not attend it. Investigators believe that even if Andrea did run away, she wouldn't have been able to survive long on the streets without money. Andrea's family has never believed that she ran off, but rather that foul play was likely involved in the case. She hasn't had any contact with her family since she disappeared, and investigators have called it odd that child at Andrea's age could be gone for so long. Investigators have looked at the possibility that Andrea might have been a victim of killers, Mark Reeb and William Alex Wells. While Reeb was confessing to one of many murders he committed, he made a point of saying that he was not involved in Andrea's disappearance. Investigators didn't even bring up Andrea's disappearance, so they call this suspicious. It turns out that Mark Reeb did have a connection to Andrea. His stepdaughter and stepson were friends with Andrea and she had been over to their home many times prior to her disappearance. Investigators continue to believe that the man might have been involved in Andrea's disappearance and other murders. He is also a possible suspect in the 1990 disappearance of Deborah Poe. She went missing just 3 days after Durham. She has never been found. While investigators have found no evidence of foul play in Andrea's case, they believe she was possibly murdered on the evening of her disappearance. Some agencies classify Andrea's disappearance as a non-family abduction, but the exact circumstances surrounding her disappearance are unclear. At the time of her disappearance, Andrea had started attending Pryor Middle School and was said to be a good student. She had many hobbies which included camping, tennis, dancing, and going to the beach. She was said to be a spiritual youth from a young age. Her mother has now moved to South Carolina. Andrea's disappearance remains unsolved, and she's never been located. Foul play is possible in her case. She might be listed as an endangered runaway with agencies. If you have any information concerning this case, please contact Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office 850-651-7400.
Number 3.
Jamal was last seen with his brother, Basil, in Richmond, Virginia on April 16, 1990. The boys were dropped off at their mother, Tambra Ellis's home by their stepmother in the 1700 block of Clarkson Road. At 2:30 p.m., the two boys went outside to play in the front yard while their mother slept. She was tired from working the night shift the day before. She eventually woke from her nap and went to look for her boys. She could not find them and started to worry. After she looked for 45 minutes, she called the police to report her two sons as missing children. The two never returned to their mom's home and were never seen or heard from again. Extensive searches of the area took place but neither brother was found. No one in the apartments reported seeing anything strange or hear anything strange. Nearby wooded areas were also searched with no indications of their whereabouts. Investigators believe that both boys were the victims of foul play. On April 19, investigators discovered Basil's body in a Chesterfield County landfill. The landfill was approximately 10 miles away from the home they disappeared from. Basil's body was fully clothed when it was discovered. Basil had been bound, gagged, and stabbed twice in the back, killing him. His skull was also fractured, but this occurred after his murder. Whoever killed him placed his body in a garbage bag and put it in a dumpster. It was then transported to the landfill from there. Investigators initially detained the boy's father, Andrea Abdul'Faruq. They held him for 3 hours under the belief that the child had been injured or killed inside his home. A search of his property had turned up nothing. He was never named as a suspect in the case, even though he did refuse a lie detector test. He said this was due to his Muslim views. Both his mother and father have been ruled out as suspects and cleared in the investigation into Jamal's disappearance and Basil's murder. Investigators suspect that the boys were abducted by a stranger. They consider the possibility that Jamal might still be alive. At the time of his disappearance, Jamal enjoyed watching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He was a second-grade student at E.S.H. Green Elementary School, and his favorite food was pizza. His disappearance remains unsolved and foul play is suspected. If you have any information concerning this case, please contact Richmond Police Department 804-780-6748.
Number 4.
Laura was last seen in Newcastle, Pennsylvania on January 7, 1993. She was last seen en route to play cards with two friends. She never returned home and was never seen or heard from again. Her mother reported her missing within 48 hours of her disappearance. Investigators initially assumed that Laura had run away from home. Her case was classified as such by law enforcement for 17 years after she went missing. Her mother hoped that Laura might have left to build herself a better life. She has never run away before and never showed an interest in doing so. In July of 2010, the truth about what happened to Laura was revealed when a woman, Shannon Marshall, went to Newcastle police and implicated her soon-to-be ex-husband and another man in Laura's slaying. Shannon told police that her husband, Joseph Marshall, confesses that he killed someone in January of 1993. He told her, before they married, and even offered to end their plans of marriage if she was too bothered by what he told her. He initially didn't reveal the victim's name, but then told her it was a girl named Laura. She stated she was always burdened by her husband's confession. She was prompted to find out more about his alleged victim and his involvement in the case, since they were getting a divorce in 2010. She searched on the website of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and found Laura's missing persons report. She then went to police and told them that her husband and his friend, Sean M. McDonough, were responsible for her death. The two were arrested and charged with killing Laura in September of 2010. They were the two friends that Laura was going to meet on the night of her disappearance. Marshall talked into a recording device that Shannon wore in order to gather incriminating evidence against her husband. In the recording, he described how he, Sean, and Laura went to Sean's mother's trailer and drank beer in Shenango Township, Pennsylvania. They then walked to a nearby cabin in the woods. He then stated that Sean began to behave erratically and talked in a satanic voice. Sean proceeded to stab Laura repeatedly until she stopped moving. He then stripped Laura's body of her clothing and had sex with her. Afterwards, he went back to the trailer to get a shovel. The two men then buried Laura's body in a shallow grave. In the next few months, Sean dug up Laura's remains and discarded of them. He dug up her skull, mandible, and hands and discarded of them elsewhere. In the summer of 1993, Shannon accompanied Sean and Joseph to the area that they buried Laura in. She stayed in the car while they dug up Laura's bones. They allegedly scattered her remains in a partially wooded field in Hickory Township. It's also possible they were put in a ravine. Forensic searches have been unable to uncover any trace of Laura's body. Interestingly, when Sean was arrested in Louisiana for Laura's murder, investigators found a long lock of red hair in his apartment. Laura had red hair when she disappeared. It's unknown if the hair belonged to her. Investigators have stated they don't expect to recover Laura's remains. A farmer threw his demolished barn and large amounts of earth into the ravine after Sean and Joseph disposes of her remains in that area. Both men were charged with criminal homicide, murder, conspiracy, and abuse of a corpse. Sean McDonough was held in prison for 4 years after his arrest. They finally brought the resolution of the case forth. He was convicted of third-degree murder in connection to Laura's death. He was sentenced to between 8 and 16 years in prison. He received credit for time already served. In the same month, Joseph Marshall was convicted of misdemeanor abuse of a corpse and was sentenced to 1 to 2 years in prison. He was released from prison after serving his sentence. All the other charges against him were dropped due to lack of evidence. Shannon Marshall was never charged in connection to Laura's disappearance. She and Joseph married in 1993 and gave birth to a son and daughter. At the time of Laura's disappearance, she was known to live a life of frivolity. She gave birth to a baby son when she was 14 years old. He was 9 months old when his mother went missing. He was put in foster care after Laura's disappearance. Her mother became too sick and distraught over her daughter's disappearance to care for him. Laura was known to be friends with older adults. Sean was one of them, and he convinced her to come and play cards with him and Joseph that night. They also invited one of Laura's closest friends, Paul, who was 42 years old at the time. He declined the invitation due to an illness. Laura's body has never been found. Her case is still classified as that of an endangered runaway, but foul play is strongly suspected in her case. If you have any information concerning this case, please contact Newcastle Police Department 724-658-4741.
Number 5.
This case reminded me of some similar cases. But at the end of it all, I believe something probably happened to Jayson, and the person responsible only served 8 months. Jayson Nathaniel Pearce was last seen by his mother Napoleon Pearce around April 15, 1983, when Jayson was 1 year old. Napoleon Pearce had met a man in January 1983 by the name of John David Grooms. They got married 3 days after they met and were residing together with 1-year-old Jayson in 1983, near Phoenix. Napoleon stated that John Grooms was abusive to herself and Jayson, and she states she was deathly afraid of him. In March 1983, Napoleon was arrested for a DUI, and Jayson was with her in the car at the time. Just another month later, in April 1983, Napoleon was arrested again for the same offense and had to serve 10 days in jail. When she was released from jail and came home to the residence her, John Grooms, and her 1-year-old son Jayson shared, they were gone. John Grooms had left a note for Napoleon basically stating, "You are an unfit parent. Jayson's older brother is only 6 years old and he is lying just like you. If at all possible, I will see that Jayson doesn't turn out like that. Believe me, Jayson is safe and being well cared for. I wish I could have done the same for Jayson's brother. Napoleon Pearce never saw her son again. John Grooms also left other notes for some of his friends, saying that Napoleon was a bad mom and he was going to give Jayson to a family that practiced the Quaker religion. He said it was so Jayson could grow up in a healthy and normal environment. John Grooms assured friends that Jayson would be safe and happy with his new caregivers. In June 1983, John Grooms was indicted for felony custodial interference and was later located in Durango, Colorado in January 1984. He was arrested there. Jayson was not with John Grooms at the time, and John Grooms refused to say where he was. In the summer of 1984, John Grooms was sentenced to the maximum term of 1.8 years in prison for aggravated custodial interference. Then it was appealed down to 1.5 years, and ultimately John Grooms only served 8 months before he was released. After he was released, John Grooms not only refused to help with any further investigation in Jayson's disappearance, he also denied ever taking Jayson at all. What became of little Jayson Pearce is unknown, and this case is unsolved. I sadly don't believe he took Jayson anywhere safe. A lot of times when abductors say things like that, it translates to dead. But maybe, just maybe, he is out there and still alive. If you have any information on the whereabouts of Jayson Nathaniel Pearce, please contact the Phoenix Police Department at 602-262-7351.
Number 6.
Amanda was last seen in Fairfield, California on December 27, 1991. She was last known to be with her brother and a playmate about 4 houses away from her own home. She left them at some point between 4:30 p.m. and 5 p.m., so that's why could ride her bicycle to another friend's home. The friend lived around the corner and approximately 8 houses away from her home. She never arrived to that friend's home and was never seen or heard from again. Her bicycle was found abandoned a few blocks away from her home later in the evening. Investigators conducted extensive searches of the area but found no trace of Amanda. They did find a pair of child-sized blue socks. It's unknown if they belonged to Amanda, and there's no mention of what type of socks she was wearing that day. The socks were found in the street. Search dogs were able to trace Amanda's scent from Larchmont Drive to Oliver Road. The scent then traveled to a nearby McDonald's restaurant at the drive-thru, then east on Travis Boulevard to the westbound Interstate 80 on-ramp. Investigators suspect that Amanda was abducted by a non-family member. They think she was forced into a vehicle when she was at Larchmont Drive and Salisbury Drive. Many suspects have been named in relation to her presumed abduction. Her case may be linked to the abductions of other girls in the Bay Area. In 1979, Tara Cassie vanished while going to get her mother sugar from a store in San Pablo, California. In June of 1988, Amber Jean Swartz Garcia was abducted from the front of her house as she played with a jump rope in Pinole, California. In November of 1988, Michaela Joy Garrick was abducted from the outside of a market as she was retrieving a scooter in Hayward, California. In January of 1989, Eileen Beth Misheloff was kidnapped while she walked home from school in Dublin, California. Authorities have not conclusively linked the cases, but believe that they may be connected. A man named Timothy Binder has been treated as a suspect in Amanda's abduction for years. He's suspected in the other cases of kidnapped girls as well. He was described as weird and odd, and may have been playing mind games with the families of the abducted children. He may have been manipulating them into believing he was involved in the kidnappings. Binder came to be suspected after he sent girls of the Bay Area cards because they were lonely. Investigators asked Amber Swartz Garcia's mother, Kim, to maintain a friendship with him in order to see if he knows the whereabouts of the missing girls. She agreed that he seemed to be playing mind games and was manipulative. He did not reveal anything of significance in the cases. Binder strongly resembled a man sought in Amber's disappearance. It should also be noted that his van had pictures of young children in it. There were also posters of Amber's disappearance were on the sides of his van. Binder would frequently visit the grave of Angela Bugay. She was 5 years old when she was kidnapped and murdered in Antioch, California on November 19, 1983. Angela's body was found buried in a shallow grave a few days after her disappearance. Tim was considered a suspect in her unsolved murder for years until it was solved in 1995. Her mother's ex-boyfriend, Larry Graham, was charged with killing her in April of 1996 after his DNA was found to be a match to a semen sample found on her body. He was convicted of killing her in 2003. He took his own life in his jail cell in 2009. Investigators traced the scents of Amanda and Amber to Bugay's grave. He has not been connected to the girls' disappearances. He sent various letters and odd things to police and the FBI. Prior to Michaela's abduction, he told the FBI that he believed the next child to be taken would be 9 years of age. Michaela's kidnapping took place shortly after he told them this. She was 9 years old when she was taken. In 1990, Binder sent a holiday card to a FBI profiler. The card depicted a child holding up 4 fingers. Amanda's presumed abduction took place in December of 1991. He was named as a suspect in 1992, and his home was searched, but nothing was found. She was 4 years old when she disappeared. He also sued Amanda's hometown of Fairfield for defamation of character and won a $90,000 settlement. A man known as Curtis Dean Anderson has also been mentioned as a possible suspect in Amanda's case. He is also considered a possible suspect in the 1999 disappearance of Carla Rodriguez. In 1999, he kidnapped 7-year-old Shauna Fairchild from Vallejo, California, and held her captive for several weeks before he murdered her. He's also bragged of kidnapping 11 other girls. In 2007, he confessed to abducting and killing Amber Swartz Garcia. He died a month after his confession while he served prison time. He stated that he forcefully abducted Swartz as she played in front of her home and took her with him to Arizona. He stated that Amber was sedated until he murdered her in a motel room near the Tucson area of Arizona. He allegedly disposed of her body near Benson, Arizona. No evidence was found by investigators to corroborate his confession. They initially closed the investigation into her case, but it reopened in 2013. He was not been charged in Amanda's case before his death, and investigators are unsure of his involvement in the case. In June of 2001, investigators received a tip that Amanda was possibly lured to a house in Salisbury Street and murdered there. They also received information that her body would be found in the crawlspace of the home. Searches of the home took place, but no trace of Nicole was ever found. She had actually been to that house the day before her abduction because she wanted to play with 2 young children there. Amanda has never been seen again, and her disappearance remains unsolved. Foul play is strongly suspected. If you have any information concerning this case, please contact Fairfield Police Department 707-428-7355.
Number 7.
Douglas was last seen in Alfred, Maine on June 2, 1971. He was last seen playing in a sand pile approximately 25 yards away from the front of his home at 10:30 a.m. He lived in a mobile home on Alfred Gore Road. His mother was talking on the telephone at the time. When she concluded the call, she went out to check on her son, but he had disappeared by then. He was never seen or heard from again. Investigators initially thought that Douglas had wandered away from the area and got lost. The area around his home is rural, wooded, brushy, and swampy. Extensive searches, however, did not turn up any trace of him. They soon started to doubt that Douglas had simply wandered away. Police utilized tracking dogs. They followed Douglas's scent through a field and past an apple orchard. The scent then went onto a farm and down the driveway to the main road. Douglas's father stated he believes that his son was placed into a vehicle at that point. His mother finds it odd that the family dog didn't bark when Douglas went missing. His father believes that Douglas was abducted and killed by a sexual predator who lived in the area at the time. The person has since died. The person was never charged with involvement in the case. At the time of his disappearance, Douglas's father was an auxiliary police officer. He requested that Douglas's case be reopened in 1993. Both of his parents have since divorced, and his mother moved to New York. Investigators have stated that no one in Douglas's family is a suspect as they were all cleared in the initial investigation into his disappearance. Douglas's disappearance remains unsolved. If you have any information concerning this case, please contact Maine State Police 207-657-3030.